Thought I'd make a little video about this computer game that we're in because I'm watching certain commentators talk about these plans and agendas that keep us stuck as slaves and the need to either revolt or go to the countryside or whatever. And there may be a little bit of truth in that, but also I want to raise the fact that this is not the first time this has ever been looked at or discussed, and that lineages such as Tibetan Buddhism are all about how we can actually work with that. And I think that this is underestimated, and for many people, they don't know about this. And I remember reading something about a lot of people in Silicon Valley who were implying that we live in a kind of virtual reality and that we are part of a computer game. And again, when you look at the concepts of samsara and things like that, which is basically being stuck in these loops of cyclic existence, it is kind of a computer game. And we are here in this illusory kind of world because it's not the only place that we are to reside, because our soul is here having this experience in a body, but actually it is going to go somewhere else afterwards, after we leave the body. So it's easy to look and find quite a lot of resources that talk about this. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I think a lot of people feel very disempowered and feel like they have no free will or agency to release. And from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective, the reason that we are bound in these cyclic existence computer game molds is because of karma. And I asked my teacher, Khenpo Rinpoche, recently, is this unfolding that is here, that so many people feel very forced into having to make decisions about certain things, would you say that that is part of a collective karma that's ripening for humanity? And he said, yeah, that's the way it works. And this is where I feel people don't want to do the work. You see, karma is not just something that is served and you take it lying down. Karma is part of natural law, and it's cause and effect. So ultimately, there is something being served because we've done something in the past, okay? So that's good to look at rather than being a passive victim, and just understand that something's ripening and to take a look at that. And when we do that, it can usually become a lot more easy to deal with, because firstly, we can have a sense of remorse for what we may have done in a past life or earlier in this life. And that will start to diminish the effects somewhat. And also, if we're aware of what a karma is, there are less harsh instances sometimes and ways of remedying what is maturing that can be applied. And this is seen through things like Vedic astrology, that often we're able to look at somebody's chart and see where karma sits, and then they can actually start to meet that head on. And so this talk of having no agency and being part of a computer game, yeah, we're kind of in a waiting room here, but the waiting room does have homework. And I think if people just look at it as something that we've either got to have like a violent reaction to or run for the hills with, isn't actually the most proactive way of looking at this or dealing with it. We actually have this beautiful, beautiful time available where, because it's quite extreme but also quite collective, as a species, there's a lot we can actually do. So if we can stop just being in a kind of trauma reaction to things, which is I'm going to fight it, or I'm going to run away, or I'm going to submit, and these are all trauma responses, and actually go, right, what is happening, and become more rational about it rather than emotional, and look at where in our genetics there is maybe an inherited sense of goodness. I remember the Second World War, and we might not remember it, but part of our genetics, part of our DNA does. These are the sorts of times where we can start to realize that when we have these dramatic emotional reactions to things, we're actually helping it to clutch onto us more. Ultimately, if there is some very sinister agenda at play, the one thing we have is our consciousness, and we want to keep that robust. And people cannot control your consciousness if you don't let them. So, cultivating the mind and working through karma and working to make your day less addled by these things is a way to escape things. So if people think their mind is being controlled or they're being hijacked by the media, these things all are part of samsara. These are the things that keep people stuck in the rabbit wheel. So, or hamster wheel, sorry, wrong animal. So if we actually opt out of those and actually opt to take our consciousness for ourselves, not buy into any of that, we can actually flip a switch and move out of that construct. And this is also basics of quantum mechanics, is if you look at what you want to look at, that will, your energy and even the material resonance of that thing will change. So if you don't want to be part of something, don't look at it. Look at the society you want to make. And just utilizing your consciousness and being your own thought police is really, really important. So there's this sense of fixation around what they are trying to do, and that is a seduction of the ego, of not calming the mind and going within and clearing karma, because we're ultimately here for a reason. There's nothing in the universe that doesn't sit under the premises of natural law, and I think it's really important that people get real with this, that there's a reason this is happening, and it's not just a goodie and a baddie thing. There's certain situations and principles at play that mean that whatever's going on has a perfection. So within that, if we go out of being in a duality with it, that there's goodies and baddies, and actually deconstruct that it's time to master the mind and work with our consciousness to flip a switch to a higher vibration, we can utilize anything that's abrasive as a really good reason to step into a higher vibration. And it's easy. It's like those things are catalysts. They don't have to be bad guys. They're here because our karma let the circumstances be here for them to be here. We created that at some part of our timeline. So it's almost like the child that feels so like this about everything. It's yuck about things, that we've concocted that reality within some of our shared history as a species. And if we can look at the role that that's playing to start to realize that we can cultivate a better consciousness, we don't have to be in this sticky repulsion to it, or trauma, fight, flight, fawn, or submit, or freeze, any of those things, because those are all responses from a contracted state of being. If we can move out of the emotional into the rational, we're getting this perfect opportunity to actually atone for something that as a species we've done, and to actually utilize it as the building block to a new way. And this is seen, this is prophesied by lineages like the Jonang tradition of Tibetan Buddhism as the golden age. And we will see in other astrological systems, people talk about the age of Aquarius. So it's actually written that there is a new age coming. But if we're so busy looking at a pantomime about good guys and bad guys, and nefarious plots to control us, that is just a really good way of opting out of controlling ourselves and our own monkey mind and fixating upon a dualism. So the easy thing is to move out of a sense of dualism with that and to cultivate. So meditation, yoga, and things like that are great for that. finally, you see, within some of these higher tantras, it's really easy to emancipate if one is dedicated to it, because actually the imprint of our karmas and the things that have created this pantomime that we see can actually be unhooked from within, from applying pranayama, yoga, mindfulness, things like that. And actually, there are now systems that have been preserved for a long, long, long time that will actually enable somebody to clear all of that in one lifetime. Very, very detailed, sacred teachings and practices. And yes, somebody has to work into it, but basically, as a mirror to how crazy things look on the outside, this is everything of all our lifetimes is bubbling up and is creating this distortion because we hold all those narratives within us, and that's why we're creating this. And if we actually have the resolve to do this work, we can actually unhook and actually create peace within and peace without, which is what will also create the circumstances for the golden age to come. So we have all these quantum tools, quantum healing modalities, all these ways of working with our DNA, all these understandings of epigenetics, and these tools of yoga and pranayama that actually can mean that we can burst through that. So for every bit as bonkers and crazy as it might look out there, it is a sign of hope that actually we have everything we need to move through that. And therefore, rather than utilizing Silicon Valley ways of looking, because these people are probably, a lot of them, are probably quite removed from the sacred, and therefore the language and the articulation and the metaphors that they use are the world that they live in, which is computer-based, we can really understand the illusion and the interface that we have with the external world as being something that we actually can become an observer of, but almost in a shamanic way, that we can see how things are playing out with us and to us, so that we can actually understand how to unpick and work through that, and actually ultimately we can liberate. So we actually can liberate. And the more of us who take it upon ourselves to study these practices and to liberate ourselves, we gain freedom for this species. And I'm sitting here speaking from Guatemala, and I've been operating as a sovereign being for quite some time. And I work with these yogas, and I've really noticed how I am so much less bound by time and not controlled by time. I can work time, and I can work different timelines and work with the clock as it might be interacting with me, but I also can at times move beyond it so that it's not controlling me. And this is something that the ancients preserved these knowledge systems to do that. And once we do that, you see, we are breaking our subordination and incarceration into this certain space-time continuum that we think we have been stuck into, so that other people say is like this constructed reality, this computer game. Again, this is nothing new, and people are talking about it like this kind of capped scenario that we're on a prison planet. The only person that's keeping us a prisoner is ourself, by not working through our karma. And if we don't decide to meet it head on, we'll always feel like a victim or a prisoner. That's how I would see it. So I really encourage you to look into things like this, because actually there are keys and breadcrumbs all over the place for us to really take upon ourselves this time, and look into things like the Jonang tradition, the Kalachakra Tantra, and also I run sessions and immersions with starting to do the rewiring of the system from within to help us to get on to the rungs of the ladder to deepen into these higher yogic practices where the full emancipation is possible. So it's all there. I just want you to know, because I think a lot of people are suffering because they don't see that actually we're really, really close if we so choose to do that. I will always remain an optimist because I've seen so much crazy stuff. And I have been very depressed in the past with the state of affairs on the planet. And then I realized that that the key was my consciousness, and that I was creating my own reality. And if I wanted to, I could be a victim of all of that. And then I've spent the last 20 years cultivating my consciousness and working with certain tools and lineages to find the points of freedom and expression of freedom, and to live and be an embodiment of that. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. So please know that we're very, very close if we so want to be. Take care. Ciao, ciao.